So I graduated college and embarked on what I thought was going to be a very successful journalism career, something noble. And so the first job I found in news and in reporting was at a group of weekly newspapers in the burbs. And my starting pay was $8 an hour, which was less than I was making waiting tables as I was going to college. But I thought, this is a noble pursuit. I'm going to uphold truth and justice. I'm going to uncover scandals. I'm going to help, keep communities informed. And so my very first assignment was going to a planning commission meeting and watching people fight over a 1-foot sidewalk variance for like 3 hours. I wanted to take my pencil that I was taking notes with and stab myself in the eye. I thought, what have I done? So and then I went to another meeting, which was the historic board of review, the architectural historic board, and people were bickering over the color of window treatments on the outside of someone's home in this historic district. I mean, they just picked over the smallest details. So in this particular community, people packed the town hall and were very vocal and very engaged. And then I also had some assignments in these smaller townships and villages where it was literally me and maybe one other person in the audience as the trustees were doing their business. And so the person next to me would bring up things that I had written and say, oh, I read in the paper that you're laying these people off. And then everyone would look at me because felt like I was really put on the spot at these, And then there were other meetings where the trustees were not following Robert's Rules of Order properly. So I would tell them, like, hey, you did this wrong. In one particular instance, this guy called me. He was a township trustee, called me. I did a full interview with him, hung up. He called me 2 minutes later, and he said, everything we talked about, that was off the record. And I said, that's not how this works. I'm sorry, So the whole job of local journalism can be kind of messy sometimes, and it can be very mundane, but to these people, these things are important. And at this small newspaper chain, we had a lot of characters. One guy, he would cut out obits with funny names and put them on his corkboard. And he had a whole collection of obituaries with just bizarre names. We'd also cut out things and post them on our walls in our offices of funny mistakes, but they weren't really like mistakes. Like this guy got a job at a local company, and so our editor at the time wrote the headline and said, Johnson assumes position at new company. And we posted that like a proud parent posting a child's artwork, and we point to it and laugh at each other. And so they were like, they're great people, but I had aspirations that went beyond that. So I worked my way up from reporter to assistant editor, as we used to call it, ass editor, all the way to editor-in-chief of this newspaper. And so I did that for a while, ran this well-oiled machine. I had people working for me, worked my way up the food chain here, and I felt like I needed to move on to something else. So I found a job as a website editor at a magazine that worked in supply chain management, basically moving boxes around a warehouse. Like, so sexy, so exciting of a topic. But it was in B2B, it was in Cleveland, and I was like, okay, it's a better job. I'm gonna take it. So it was in the spring of 2001. And so as it's my last day, and I'm telling all my coworkers I'm moving on to some bigger and better things, and they sort of looked at that as like a bit traitorous. It's like, well, we're sticking it out here, miserable as hell. You're moving on. How dare you? So my last day there, it was pouring down rain, and I had my box full of my last remaining belongings at my desk, and so I'm walking out to my car, and I slip and fall right on my behind, and my box of all my things, my AP style book, went sliding across the parking lot. All my stuff, my pictures, everything just spilled out. A little embarrassed, I think some people had seen me, so I gathered my things up. I left, took my new job in Cleveland, and it was started in the early summer of 2001, and a day after 9/11, I lost my job. So it was right at the end of the dot-com bubble when it had burst, and so I think it was a moment of panic. So they bring me into the office, and they're like, this this is harder for me than it is for you. And I looked at the VP, and I'm like, you still have a job. Harder for you, really. It's like he was breaking up with me. I mean, really. He was like, started to cry a little bit, you know, I felt touched. And so I was able to get unemployment. So I left, I filed for unemployment, got my first check, and I realized this was the first time in my life since I was 14 that I wasn't working. It just didn't feel right to me. I thought, I don't know, I didn't want to be unemployed. I wanted, and so I was looking at my clips that I'd taken to that point, and was looking for other jobs in publishing, and I looked at my stuff and I'm like, this really isn't as good as I thought it was. Like, I thought I was a much better writer at the time than I really was. So what I did, I called the company I worked for, and I said, I'd like my job back. And she said, well, your job is taken, so we can start you off back as a reporter again. So I basically started at the very bottom of the food chain, worked my way back up. So I got a job back at this newspaper company in a satellite office in Bedford, and it was like, it was such a strange little office, and I covered a whole group of newspapers, the Maple Heights paper and Nordonia and Macedonia, and so it was very bizarre, and I went through the motions of these rigorous meetings and all of these weird, idiosyncratic people and residents. And so I worked my way back up again to a regional editor. So I was doing Summit County and Ohio News for this whole newspaper chain, and sort of forged a job for myself along those ranks. And oddly enough, I ended up going back to the company I'd worked for previously, but at a different magazine. So I basically flip-flopped between two companies for like 10 years over this period. So when I went back, some friends of mine said, when you left, after you've left, we've told people as a cautionary tale, when you leave, don't go out like Miller. It's like, fell on my ass. They're like, don't go out like Miller. I'm like, you're right. I didn't go out properly the first time. This time I left with my feet on the ground, my head held high, and I didn't go back, which was great. And I realized, and I learned a lot more in those last couple years that I was there as a writer, as a journalist. So actually, I wrote down a few of these, talk about transformation. So I learned a few lessons. And they are, we're usually better writers than we give ourselves credit for, but as soon as we think we have no more to learn, we're done. I've also learned that writer's block doesn't exist when you write for a living. It just doesn't exist. You make yourself do it. I also learned that there's no topic too mundane to write about. There's usually a way to make anything interesting if you do a good enough job as a writer. And then my last bit of transformative advice is, don't quit your job when it's raining. You'll likely fall on your ass. Thank you.